25-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. Oh, the man is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Well, welcome in one and all to the Three Technique, the college football podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and Joes. I'm Trey Reeves. I'll be joined here in just a second by the one and only Mitch Mason as he sprints home from obligations before this early college football playoff rankings release. This is a fun little Tuesday live show as we count down to the penultimate college football playoff rankings. A lot of stuff to talk about on the program tonight. We've got some coaching carousel news, of course, that we have not really gotten a chance to break down. We've got the penultimate college football playoff rankings. We're also going to preview the championship game slate, championship week slate tonight for all the games on Friday and Saturday. We'll talk about all 9 conference championship games and what they could mean for the ultimate college football rankings that are going to come out on Sunday. Glad you're along with us tonight as we count down to these kickoffs. I've got SportsCenter pulled up on my side screen here. It looks like we're starting in just about 2 minutes with the penultimate college football playoff rankings. And we'll start there because there is a lot to look forward to. Rivalry week did not really live up to the ultimate chaos scenarios that we laid out, but there was a little bit of chaos. Of course, it started Friday night with Texas knocking off Texas A&M. We know the Aggies are going to fall. We don't know how far they're going to fall. I think there's a really interesting discussion to be had at that 5, 6, 7 range between Oregon, Texas A&M, and Ole Miss. Maybe even throw Texas Tech in there as well if we're just comparing resumes straight up. We'll talk about that in a little bit. There's also the age-old question of what to do with Miami and Notre Dame. Of course, all year long, Notre Dame has been higher on the college football playoff committee's rankings. We're of the opinion that Miami should be in there. The head-to-head results should matter, but not our decision. We'll see if the committee has finally changed its tune after we got another data point in favor of the Hurricanes handling Pittsburgh really well, just like Notre Dame did. Again, glad to have you guys along. If you have thoughts, we'd love to hear them. Throw them in the chat. Make sure that you are following along on the socials as well. And guys, it's time to be joined by the one and only Mitch Mason. We'll throw him here on the screen and I will adjust the picture. Mitch, while I do that, what are your initial thoughts today as we count down to these rankings?
Oh, man. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on your program. Glad. There we go. There we are on screen. Yeah, just glad to be here. I think, and apologies if I'm repeating anything that you've kind of led with. I think first and foremost, the doomsday scenario is.
Nope, haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay,
so
that's like the granddaddy of all headlines. What happens if Duke ends up winning? If a couple of dominoes in front of Duke fall and lose, and the committee literally has to go to like the FPI and in the net ratings and figure out, oh my gosh, could a 5-team playoff or a 5-win team actually make the playoff? I think where Texas ends up, there's been so much discourse on where the Longhorns should slot in. We've obviously talked ad nauseum in the recap about where Miami and Notre Dame should fit in. And then what do you do with Alabama? Where are they seated? Are they locked into the playoff? Chris Fowler certainly made the case on Saturday night after the Iron Bowl win that they were in, that was all they had to do. You've run into a math problem, though. And so I'm still of the mind that even though Alabama should not be punished for making the SEC championship game and potentially losing to Georgia, I wonder if the committee has painted themselves into such a corner that they have to kick out a team that loses in the conference championship. So anyway, those are all the things kind of running around in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, I keep coming back to there is a preconceived notion that we've all had about the college football playoff that will fall this week, whether it's, head to head matters the most. And ultimately it will, be the trump card at the end of the day. That could fall if Notre Dame gets in over Miami. If it's 10-2 guarantees in a power conference like the SEC or Big Ten, guarantees you're in. Obviously, not all the 10-2 teams are going to get in because Vanderbilt and Oklahoma and Alabama, there's not room for all three of those teams, right? Or the conference championship situation. Alabama could be forced out if they lose. That chaos scenario that you talked about, if you have to put BYU in, if you have to put 2 G5 teams in, could that force Alabama out? I've seen a lot of speculation today that we'll see Alabama actually jump Notre Dame tonight on these rankings as a preview of, hey, if you see Alabama at 9, it means they're safe no matter what, because they would hold style. They'd fall only to 10 if they win, or if they lose, I should say. If you still see Alabama at 10, it could be the committee tipping their hand that, hey, conference champion losers aren't safe. And man, there's a lot of talk about what the SEC would do in that scenario. Like all the negotiations are still up in the air for next year. So much is going to be told to us by these rankings tonight. I'm really excited to see it, but we're going to break it all down. The talking heads are head talking right now. We've got Greg
on time
McElroy
too.
On
That's
stream.
huge.
They're on time. There's no basketball game between 2 random teams that's going to 40 minutes overtime, or like it was last week, whatever it was. So we should get those rankings here pretty early. Did want to get your thoughts real quick. You mentioned it. You've seen some speculation online today that maybe Texas is going to come in the 11 or 12 range tonight. Is that anything else you want to share about that? Or what are we thinking would be a good baseline for the Longhorns? And what would it mean for their actual chances to get in a large bid?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating discussion because Texas, without a doubt, has a tremendous resume. 3 top 10 wins. They played Ohio State, the number 1 team in the country, close. They lost 14-7 in the first week of the season as we start to get some of the
let me jump in real quick. James Madison and North Texas are in the top 25. That is
so
huge.
Overdue. So overdue.
Very overdue. I totally agree. Iowa also sneaks in as well. Georgia Tech moved up after losing to Georgia, apparently, and Houston is in at number 21. That's huge, Mitch, because the speculation all week has been what happens if Duke wins the ACC championship. Now we have JMU in the top 25, so we know if Duke beats Virginia, there will be 2 G6 programs in the college football playoff field, and the ACC will likely be out unless Miami gets an at-large bid.
I'm interested. I mean, there's no way Tulane is at 20, right? We're still
20. Yeah, they moved up.
There they are. There they are at 20. I'm just like maybe 10 seconds behind you. So yeah, there you go. So they would have to accept that 2 group of teams would get in ahead of a 5-loss Duke team, which makes sense, right? I mean, at a certain point, we have to call a spade a spade. We have to say that the ACC painted themselves into a corner with their lack of foresight on tiebreaker situations. I bet you Jim Phillips has already penned what will be the new ACC rules, the new tiebreaker rules going into 2026, because they've screwed themselves as a conference. They have, in effect, taken the ACC from the realm of the Power 4 to a group of 6 contender, essentially by virtue of where their tiebreakers net out and who they're compared against.
Virginia in at 17, USC at 16. Here's where it gets interesting, Mitch, with the talk about Texas. We see the Utes at 15. They are down 2 despite beating Kansas. Vanderbilt in at 14. So they at 10-2 in the SEC. There's preconceived notion number 1 officially down. They are not in and really do not have a path at this point unless the committee just completely reevaluates things next week.
Which is so frustrating, I know, for Vanderbilt fans. Like at a certain point, what else do you want us to do, right? 10 wins in the SEC, a historic season for a program that's completely rebuilt. Texas comes in at number
13.
Number 13, but
that's exactly where I thought they would be, Mitch.
Yeah,
I thought they would be at 13. The talk this afternoon that maybe they're up to number 11, I really didn't see it. And I think the 3 losses, and Texas fans will point to the wins, like you said, but the loss to Florida is anchoring that resume. And playing Ohio State is the reason you're a 3-loss team ahead of other 2-loss teams.
Well, and we got cut off. What I was going to mention was that the betting markets started wildly swinging in favor of Texas making a playoff run. They were plus 1,800, I think, when the day started. Then, depending on where you looked, they were all the way down to like plus 550. So I was kind of wondering what was fueling that ramp up. It's really just a case of what if, I think, and a lot of people trying to buy into Texas getting in as an at-large bid. Miami comes in at number 12. You can see that the committee wants to put them in. They want to get them into the field. But Trey, they're going to need all kinds of help. And the fact that they're stuck at 12 now, we'll see where Notre Dame comes in. But this committee is going to catch all kinds of flack. And I think that we are in real trouble as far as the health and the future of non-conference games. If two teams that are comparable, Miami and Notre Dame, the deciding factor is not head-to-head on the field.
Well, listen, all the analytics will tell you Notre Dame is the better team. And I think that slightly, absolutely. And Miami has done a good job of making sure their metrics are boosted the last couple of weeks with the way that they've handled the end of games. But at the end of the day, the spirit of competition says that head-to-head should matter. And if we're talking about putting teams in different buckets and they're not even in the same comparative bucket, okay. And I also do get the argument that it was a long time ago. Notre Dame has dropped to 10. Oof. So very interesting. Notre Dame at 10, Alabama at 9, I'm assuming. I think that's going to mean that Alabama is safe. We'll see if Alabama climbed a little higher, but I think that's the committee tipping their hand that, hey, we're giving Alabama a little bit of a cushion here. Real quick, I know you have something, I can see it, but on the Miami Notre Dame thing, just really quickly, the strength, the metrics really love Notre Dame. They were right there with Texas A&M. That would have been a huge win. And I get that Miami has bad losses. If we're going to dog Texas for the loss to Florida, we should dog Miami to 2 unforgivable losses. Playoff teams should not lose to Louisville and SMU this year. I think that is a fair argument to make, but at the end of the day, same record. And a good argument against Notre Dame is they're the only team that's a relative playoff team. UConn is this way too, but I'm not talking about the Huskies, that controls their entire schedule. The ACC sets them up with some games, but they could end that ACC agreement if they really wanted to. They control their entire schedule. And so they should maybe get a little less grace for losing 2 games.
So is the playoff field essentially set? Do we have 10 teams then? And then BYU and Miami are on the outside looking in with...
Well, BYU can win their way in.
That's true. So that's fair.
Oklahoma's at 8. Alabama is at 9. So right now there'd be a rematch in Norman of that game from a couple weeks ago. That's very interesting. I'm very interested to see this. And A&M falls all the way to 7. I have some thoughts. Thoughts about that, Mitch. I don't think that is the right decision. I think that is the committee being lazy. Yeah. And I'll defend that in just a second. Ole Miss up to 6. That means I think we know the top 5. The top 5 is going to be Oregon, Texas Tech, Georgia, Indiana, Ohio State. But if we want to get into this right now, I can. I do not think that Ole Miss should be ahead of Texas A&M.
No, I don't think that they're a better team than Texas A&M.
I think that is asinine.
And, for all the critique of A&M's schedule, strength of schedule in the SEC, guess who has a worse strength of schedule in the SEC? The Ole Miss Rebels. So this is complete pontification by the committee, creating hypotheticals. They're essentially saying, for no real reason other than whatever numbers that they've decided to cobble together, that they believe that Ole Miss without Lane Kiffin is better than Texas A&M. Now, Ole Miss did get their offensive coordinator and Charlie Weiss Jr. back. He got on the plane to go to Baton Rouge. Evidently, he was on a plane ride back. And you're right. Oregon 5, Texas Tech at 4, Georgia 3, Indiana 2, Ohio State 1. They took all the drama out of that. But that is shocking. And that may be the most shocking result of the evening so far. You could certainly see them dropping to 6 with the way that Oregon has just continued to win, closing out their rivalry slate with a win over Washington. But dropping them behind Ole Miss, Trey, listen, Aggie glasses aside, well, that doesn't really sit well with me.
Can you see the graphic on the screen right now,
I can.
Mitch?
Yep.
Okay, so I've done my homework here, and this is all 4 of the 11-1 at-large teams. I put Texas Tech in here too, just for comparison. The Massey composite, that top line, is 80 different computer rankings. So if you want to say that I'm cherry picking computer rankings, that is 80 of them averaged out. A&M comes out ahead of Ole Miss versus the top 30 in Sagarin. A&M has 5 wins compared to Ole Miss's just 3. Strength of schedule is 15-40. Mitch, like, what are we doing? Strength of record 3-7. What are we doing? Like Ole Miss, and you don't have your head coach. That is preposterous. I know that we are Texas A&M fans, but man, the committee got that wrong. In my opinion, that is just being lazy and saying late loss bad, loss in October not as bad.
Right. And
it's so simplistic. That sucks.
It does feel like they went, well, they both lost on the road. Who is the higher rated team? Georgia. Okay, then Ole Miss is clearly better than Texas A&M. Do me a favor.
Not taking rivalry games into account, not taking any critical thinking into account.
Do me a favor, for those that are listening on the podcast, behind this or after the fact, you get a behind the scenes glimpse. Put that in the Discord for me. I'm going to end up just tweeting that graphic out. I think that's important to share with the people. Yeah. Okay. So that sits not great. What that would do, Trey, then is A&M would host a playoff game as it currently sits. They would be hosting the 10 seed, which is Notre Dame. We would get a rematch back in College Station. I think that would be a fantastic matchup. But Ole Miss is going to get the 11 seed, which currently is tabled as conference champion number 4. That likely is either the winner of North Texas or UNT. Or Virginia.
Chalk, it's Virginia.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. With all this talk about the doomsday scenario, I keep forgetting that Virginia actually has a very real chance to win that game. They did it earlier in the season. They won by 17. So there's nothing to say that a healthy Chandler Morris and that offense can't go blow Duke off the field. And like is not, we'll talk about conference championships here coming up in just a bit, but I don't think there's a reason on the field to pick Duke to win. It's just been a funny thought experiment.
I mean, listen, we'll talk about that game in depth here in a little bit, but yeah, I think that, to close out my thoughts on this, Ole Miss, the only thing that you could point to, I think the SP Plus, if you're a disciple of the SP Plus, they do have Ole Miss 1 spot ahead of Texas A&M. The only thing that you can point to is, I guess, the Oklahoma win as their best win being better than the Notre Dame win for Texas A&M. I think that's debatable. I think that's splitting hairs. I think if you're using computer rankings, Notre Dame is a far better team than Oklahoma. Both of them did it on the road. That's a pretty negligible point right there. But yeah, I'm not happy about that one. It's another instance, and if you're an A&M fan, it's another instance of a committee kind of giving your team the screws. On Sunday, the volleyball team should have had a 2 seed. They got a 3 seed. So this is just something we're used to at this point.
It really is. A&M and the committees do not go well together. There's no hope. There's no glass half full for Texas A&M when it comes to the committee.
Yeah, selfishly, I was also hoping for cheap playoff tickets. If it was Virginia or North Texas, if it's Notre Dame, that can go out the window. I paid $250 for a regular season game against Notre Dame last year. I think I could probably quadruple that for my expectations if I wanted to go to that game. So we'll wait it out. But alas, your bracket here, Mitch, if you want to stall for just a second, just give maybe a couple overall thoughts, set up the weekend for us. I'm going to find just a graphic for the people right here so they can see the bracket.
Sure. No problem. I think overall, the top 5 seeds are probably the most important here. I think they got those completely right. Texas Tech sliding up into the 4th seed is great. They've earned that. Oregon at 5, I think they've played well to go 11-1. That was better than, Trey, what you and I expected. You and I had them finding another loss. And so for their defense to step up in a timely manner, the offense looked shaky at times, but when they really needed to, outside of that Indiana game, they took care of business. I'm so fascinated to see if that ninth spot for Alabama keeps them safe. Because if it does with a loss and they drop them to, I guess it would be the probably the 12th seed. I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't move them. Maybe they'd move them down one. Like, we don't know how they would treat an Alabama loss. And I guess so much of that is dependent on how they lose to Georgia, if they lose to Georgia. But I think it's an interesting spot to put Alabama, to put them ahead of Notre Dame. BYU sitting there at number 11. They can win their way in. This is also saying that we would get two Big 12 teams. With Texas Tech moving up to number 4, there is no way that they're dropping them all the way out of the playoff if they manage to lose to Brigham Young in the Big 12 championship game. So interesting to see how this all plays out this weekend. Some high stakes, I think. I'll kick it back to you if you're ready. It looks like the graphic's up. Miami and Texas. What do you need if you're a fan of either of those teams, if anything, to get in? Is your season done? Like, what are you hoping for at this point?
I guess you hope that Alabama gets blown out by Georgia.
Yeah.
And it just kind of forces the committee's hand to say, hey, you are not playing you're not playing your best football right now. I think they're dead. I don't see a way without playing another game that they can find their way in here, Mitch. I don't see how Texas can move all the way up from 13. I think if you're Miami, you have a prayer that BYU wins their way in, and now all of a sudden, maybe that kicks Tech out. I don't think that Tech would fall all the way out with one loss. So I'm really struggling to see the path here. I don't think it's possible, short of the committee just maybe an injury causes the Florida State situation. Like, I really don't know. I saw some speculation that Jeremiah Love had a cryptic Instagram post last night about thanking the Irish fans for everything that they've been through together. So I don't know, like maybe that's it, but short of something just really unprecedented, I think the dream is dead for both of those two teams.
I tend to agree. I hate it for Vandy too. You know, it feels like Vandy's season is going to get stuck in kind of the rearview mirror. You hate to say that it all came down to the loss to Texas, but you know, for the Longhorn fans, it probably all came down to the loss to Florida. So I do like that in that way, the regular season still matters, right? That was the biggest conclusion from the haters of the expansion was by doing this, by setting it up this way, the regular season doesn't matter, that you can lose 3 games and it won't be of consequence. Well, now we're going to have multiple 10-2 teams that are very, very good, that I think could beat a number of the teams that are in the playoff field right now. In some cases, we've watched it happen, right? In some cases, we've watched that actually occur on the field. I do think that's a win for the state of college football, the season actually mattering. And I think it's certainly a nail in the coffin of that narrative that, well, it doesn't really matter what happens on a week-to-week basis. As long as you do good enough and have the right logo on the side of your helmet, you're into the playoff.
Well, lots to watch for this weekend still. I think there's teams that could still win their way in. We'll talk about the conference championship games here in just a second. But I guess on the surface, I mean, A&M Notre Dame, the rematch, do they rethink that? There's 2 rematches on the board right now. Do they rethink that? Do you obviously if Alabama?
No, I hope not. We've accused them in the past of doing that, right? In avoiding conference on conference matchups or avoiding a rematch. Them's the ways the cookies crumbled, right? I don't think that should, whether it's a conference or a seeding or a rematch from the regular season, should ever determine seeding, right? If we're doing that, then you're tinkering with whatever model you're using as your Bible. And I think that's one of the most dishonest and least productive ways that we can run this sport. The committee already screws up just about everything else. They set terrible precedent every year. I'm actually thinking it's kind of a refreshing change to have 2 rematches that, you know, listen, these guys are motivated by the dollars going into their pockets. Those are 2 high-powered rematches that everybody in this sport would love to see. It will draw all the eyes of the nation. You know, they're just going to make dollars hand over fist. The conferences are by putting these together. So, you know, from that standpoint, the logic actually tracks.
Well, now the more that I think about it, I don't think A&M should have expected an Arkansas AD-led committee to do them any favors. So
Can
this is
you
about
imagine?
what I expect. So hey, A&M Notre Dame would be a fantastic matchup in the first round. So would Alabama, Oklahoma. Those would be great. I don't see either the other two teams pulling off the upset against Oregon or Ole Miss, but hey, it's college football. You line them up on Saturday, anything can happen. Mitch, before we transition to the game, any games this weekend, any closing thoughts on the committee rankings or just life in general? Like, where do you want to take us right now?
Life in general, I've had my fix of Christmas lights and parade decorations. College football wise, get sitting athletic directors off this committee, man.
Yeah.
It's as corrupt as it can be. We've beat that horse to death. We're gonna have to continue to beat it to death. But Hunter Yurchek on my screen right now makes me sick. There's no way that you can pretend like there's any integrity in this process right now. And it's probably not going to change because, like I said, the dollars that are invested in this going on behind the scenes, it's hilarious to point holes in their logic and understand that they're actually hurting their bottom line with some decisions while obviously benefiting it with others. Like there's just no shred of common sense or consistency from these people. And I hate it. So I would love to find another way to go around it, some sort of BCS model that is overseen by some sort of committee, someone that can interject some human common sense. But what we've got right now is hilarious.
Don't disagree. I can't disagree with any of that. Well, let's transition over to the games on the field. We'll talk about stakes with each of these. Some of these matter more than others, right? Like I think it's awesome that we'll start in the Big Ten here in just a second, but I think it's awesome that we're getting 1 versus 2, a game that we didn't get in the regular season. It's going to be a great benchmark, hopefully, to see just where these teams are in comparison to one another. But ultimately, neither one of those two, I don't think, is going to fall out of the top 4. So the stakes might not be quite as high. The SEC, I think, has maybe some stakes diminished with Alabama moving up to number 9, but we'll see there. Let's start in the Big Ten, though. We'll start with maybe the 2 games that don't have the biggest stakes, but have the big names. We'll start with Indiana taking on Ohio State in Indianapolis. This is a 4.5-point favorite in favor of the Buckeyes. It'll be 7:00 on Saturday night on Fox. Mitch, as you look at these 2 teams and just kind of analyze what you've seen on the field so far this year, I think that obviously they're both 2 of the best teams in the country, if not the 2 best teams in the country. Indiana's been a little bit more tested than Ohio State, but do you see anywhere where either team kind of has the edge over the other just right off the bat on paper?
Yeah, I think it's a battle of maybe best on best. You've got the number 2 scoring offense in the country in Indiana against the number 1 scoring defense in the country in Ohio State. I chuckle back to the preseason when we were all kind of in a flutter that Jim Knowles went to Penn State and, oh my gosh, this is a huge loss for Ohio State. And I was making the point that, hey, listen, when Ohio State hired Jim Knowles, it took them a minute to get the guys to conform to the system. And so I made the case that, hey, Ohio State's defense, probably you should expect a little bit of a fall off under Matt Patricia as he finds his way into the college ranks and, just kind of has to start from the ground up. Couldn't be further from the truth. Ohio State has not allowed 17 points in any of their games. I believe they're the first team actually since 75 to hold all of their opponents under 17 points all through the regular season. Just historic stuff from the Buckeyes. I want to see what Indiana can do both from a ground game and from a passing standpoint, right? Fernando Mendoza has been electric this year. A lot of people consider him the front runner to win the Heisman this year, but I do want to see what it's like when he goes up against the 85 Bears, right? This offense, Curt Cignetti just keeping the foot on the gas has been amazing to watch. And it's been truly revolutionary to watch the Hoosiers do something like this to just everybody in their wake. But now when you're facing a defense that basically forces you to attempt field goals at the best case scenario, what do the Hoosiers have in the tank for that? Are they able to establish the ground game, keep drives moving ahead of the chains? What is Fernando Mendoza when that coverage is making it really difficult to get it to his athletes in space? Without a doubt, I think that's the best single storyline that we get to watch on our TV this week. I think maybe as close to an NFL, comparison as you can get.
I think so too. I think these are two really evenly matched teams. Obviously, if you just look at recruiting rankings, Ohio State is going to have way more just dudes on paper. The talent composite is going to be way heavy in favor of Ohio State, but Indiana has maybe just as many or more proven college commodities, right? That they're going to put out on the field on both sides of the ball. You think about just the receiver matchup. Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper, they are not the big names that Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith are, right? But when you just look at pure college production, those guys are dudes that have balled out on a lot of really good defenses throughout their college careers. So I'm really excited to see it. I think that if you're nitpicking both of these teams, the thing that maybe this game comes down to is who's a little bit better in those short yardage situations, right? We've talked about that with Ohio State. It's a little bit of an issue with Indiana as well, that when they are in those short yardage situations, when they need 3 yards on third down, right? When they need to convert a 4th and 1, sometimes it's not as easy as you'd think it would be with the talent advantages and just the advantages that they've shown every other place. Now for Indiana, they haven't been in as many of those situations because they've just been blowing most teams out. But Ohio State's been in a few more. We've seen that come up a little bit in the struggles. So I'm interested to see, that could be the difference maker here for me. Who's able to convert that 3rd and 3 in the middle of the third quarter that extends a drive and keeps their defense off the field a little bit, maybe turns 3 points into an opportunity for 7. I could see it being a really low scoring game though. I think both of these two teams are going to keep things relatively close to the vest. I think that when you think about it, like I said off the top, both of them are going to be locked in to a first round bye in the college football playoff. I don't see any way that they're going to be falling outside of that range. But I think that as it's a low scoring game, who can find those inches, find those conversions in the middle of the game is going to be a big opportunity there. So I think I'm going to take the Buckeyes. I think they've been here. I'd say that they've been here before, right? They've been in these big game environments. Obviously, they went all the way to the national championship. This is the first time they're playing in a Big Ten championship game with fans since 2019. So this group of Buckeyes has not been in this specific situation. And there's going to be a lot of Indiana fans in that crowd. It's a massive alumni base, obviously right in their backyard in Indianapolis. But I think I'm going to take the Buckeyes to cover this one. I think that they just maybe have 1 or 2 more dudes, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'd take them in a rematch. Who knows what we're going to see and how it would lay out in a future rematch.
Yeah, that line is, the over-under is 48.5. So Vegas is telling you expect, something like a 24-21 style of ball game, right? And that's where I think I'm going to take this. I think 24-20 is the score that came to mind when reviewing this. Buckeyes winning the game. But I'll take Indiana to cover. You mentioned who can get that third down conversion, who can keep the drive alive. Bo Jackson has been fantastic for Ohio State in these last couple of weeks. We really saw him kind of grind away against Michigan, and it felt like he was actually able to get the tough yards instead of C.J. Donaldson, which when the season began, Jackson was a highly touted freshman. C.J. Donaldson was a guy that we'd seen do it at West Virginia. We thought was one of the biggest gets of the portal. And it felt like Michigan really neutralized him to a way that they just couldn't account for with Bo Jackson. Indiana's second in rushing defense, right? They've hung their hat on the physicality of this defensive line the last 2 years. And I really appreciate that from this Hoosiers team. It's not like an air raid team where we're winning, 56-48, something like that. They're playing elite defense as well. I think they're really going to stress Julian Sayin at the quarterback position. This will be, bar none, the best defense that he's seen all season long. And really, I think the last defense that you can even go toe-to-toe with is Texas, way back in week 1. And I know that was week 1. All the rust, never started a game before. I get all of that. So it's not a direct comparison, but we did see the Ohio State offense struggle to move the ball through the air. I think that this is a much better Ohio State team come the conference championship week, a much more seasoned Ohio State team. And Julian Sayin has done some elite things from a numbers perspective. So I trust him in this offense to be able to take the opportunities afforded to them by the Hoosier, or by their defense, by the best defense in the country. Very, very slim margin, but I'll go with the Buckeyes.
Garrett, your endpoint can be right here for the video cut, but I want to show a couple of the comments here. We've got Tom in the chat says Patricia could just confuse Mendoza. I could definitely see that. I think the coordinator advantage is on the side of the Buckeyes, and maybe that does help them to pull away late. And then we had a question from Jared in the chat. Does anything come from the headset communications being cut off during the game up in Ann Arbor? Brother, I don't know if you followed Michigan football the last couple of years when it comes to consequences. There haven't been a ton that have actually been lasting, so I wouldn't hold your breath on that one.
Yeah, no comment there. I think you're perfectly right.
All right, well, let's move on to the SEC here. Like I said off the top, maybe the games with fewer direct consequences here. We now know the rankings in this one, right? It's Alabama, Georgia. We now know that Georgia is number 3 in the latest college football playoff rankings. Alabama checked in at number 9. And Georgia are 2.5-point favorites going into this one in Atlanta. If it seems like deja vu, you're not crazy. This is the 12th straight year that either Alabama or Georgia have made the SEC championship game. This is the 5th time since 2012 that these two have matched up in Atlanta for all the marbles in the SEC. So, one way or another, Greg Sankey's getting his favorite game, right? We knew that was going to come down to this year. But
that's right.
Obviously, the other storyline here is that these two met on the field in Athens back in week 5. Alabama won the game 24-21. Very interesting game if you think all the way back to that one in September. It was a game where Alabama raced out to, I think, a 24-7 lead at halftime. I don't think they shut out the Bulldogs in the first half, but I can go look that up. They raced out to the lead. They got shut out themselves in the second half. Kirby Smart ultimately goes for a touchdown on 4th and goal when he could have kicked a chip shot field goal to tie. He leaves those points on the board. That ends up being the difference in that game. And the Tide wins 24-21 in Athens. Obviously, a lot has changed since then. I think this Georgia offense has really found itself. The game against Georgia Tech notwithstanding, they looked really bad against the Jackets in that rivalry game. But overall, the Georgia offense has really found itself since then. Bama's offense, on the other hand, has kind of, I don't know if it's, just run out of gas, if it's the league has caught up to them and they just kind of know what they're wanting to do and they're stopping it better. Maybe they've shown something on film. They feel like two offenses moving in different directions, though, and I think that could lead to an advantage for the Bulldogs in this one.
I agree. I suddenly don't trust Alabama's ability to move it consistently through the air. I'll say this in favor of Ty Simpson. When he's on, man, some of those throws that he made into the tightest possible windows of coverage, NFL throws, right? You're not going to top them. There are throws that Simpson makes that as a defense, you throw your hands up, you tip your cap, and you move on to the next play. You're not defending that. But at the same time, when Simpson has been moved off his spot as of late, and it was something that I thought he was elite at kind of in the middle portion of the season, but down the stretch, I've started to wonder if he's not seeing the field quite as clearly as he was maybe early on. You combine that with, again, the just perpetual inability to run the football, and I've got to think that Georgia finally gets over the hump, that Kirby gets his second ever win against the Crimson Tide this week. Georgia can run the ball. They ran it for 227 yards against the Tide in that first matchup. It's been one of their best strengths down the stretch as well. And Gunnar Stockton has just quietly been keeping this offense on track, not making a lot of mistakes, maybe not making a lot of highlight plays either, but he's not going to cost you a game. when I think about how Alabama wins this, the defense has really made their reputation on some key turnovers. They did not get those turnovers against Oklahoma, and you saw them lose. They almost didn't get those turnovers against Auburn, and it almost cost them that game late as well. I just have a hard time thinking that the Tide turned the Bulldogs over enough to actually win this game. I think we're going to see a scenario where the committee has to make a hard decision about what to do with a 3-loss Alabama. I'm going to take the Bulldogs to win this one, and I'll take them to cover. I'll say 24-21 Georgia. I'm sorry, 27-21 Georgia wins this one.
Well, it would be bucking a trend. Obviously, Kirby Smart has done very well against everybody else in college football, but Alabama has been his problem. It's been well documented. He's 1-7 against the Tide, 0-2 against Kalen DeBoer. Both of those coming in the regular season. So, I mean, Alabama tends to play up to these situations in under Kalen DeBoer, do they not? Like they tend to play up in these big games, maybe down to the competition a little bit in the lower level games, and that's where they've really struggled under Kalen DeBoer. I'm taking Georgia to cover and win this one as well, but I do think this is going to be a really close back and forth, hard fought game. I think Alabama's going to play this one like their college football playoff lives depend on it. Kind of similar to how Georgia did last year. Georgia, if you remember, came into this game with 2 losses last year, and they could have folded. They could have just said, hey, I think we're in, especially when their starting quarterback goes down, right? But they find a way to just play really aggressive, nasty football on the defensive side of the ball and find a way to beat Texas last year. I think Alabama is going to play the exact same way this year, and maybe it'll be enough to knock off the Tide. But I do think Georgia wins. Want to go back to something that you said really quickly, though, because do you think that the committee would actually drop Alabama out? Because I think we said this off the top. If you've been here since the beginning, I apologize for repeating, but do you think, I think the committee moving them up to 9 is building in that cushion to leave them in. I think that they would fall to 10 maybe if they lose, and maybe they would end up in College Station instead of Notre Dame with the way that bracket's set up. But I think that that's building in a cushion to keep them in even if they lose.
Well, and here's the inconsistency, I think, with the committee's thinking, their model, their numbers, whatever it is. They're admitting that by dropping Texas A&M to 7, it doesn't necessarily matter what the metrics say, what the eye test says, that a late loss can hurt you worse than an early loss, right? Alabama lost to number 11, Oklahoma at home, a close game. They didn't really punish them for that. But when you look at Alabama's recent form, I wonder at what point the other shoe drops. Their last quality win was then number 11 Tennessee, who they kind of throttled late on the road 37-20. Tennessee didn't beat a ranked team all season long and just got boat raced at home by Vanderbilt. They beat South Carolina by 7. They beat a bad LSU team by 11. They lost to Oklahoma at home, and it took a last second fumble to stave off Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Like, at what point do we start to take into account some recent trends, some recent numbers to add to the fact that, yes, they beat a ranked Missouri team on the road, to say that they beat Vanderbilt at home and that they beat a ranked Georgia team? I'm not necessarily questioning the resume of Alabama. I'm not even saying that they're not one of the best teams in the country. I absolutely believe that. But I'm also saying, when it comes apples to apples, at what point does Alabama move into the block with Notre Dame, with Miami, with BYU, with Texas? Like, at what point does the Venn diagram say, okay, now these teams are all in the same bubble? That's, I think, the biggest question that I'm left with week in and week out is, you say you're comparing all these teams in their pools. What the heck are the pools?
Well, listen, you said earlier off the top that Miami was getting screwed by their tiebreakers in the ACC. This is a team that is getting huge benefit from their tiebreakers in the SEC, because they actually, statistically, Mitch, because of the head-to-head win over Georgia and because of how the tiebreakers play out, they are the regular season SEC champions.
That's amazing.
So I think that everything you're saying is true. I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, but I think the principle of leaving out the regular season, I know that regular season champions don't exist. They don't hang a banner for that, but the principle of leaving out the team that came in first in the SEC in the regular season, the committee doesn't have the balls to do that. I really just don't think like that would burn the whole thing down. Like Miami can talk a big game. Texas can talk a big game about canceling out of conference games in the future and all these things. You want to know what would really burn this whole thing to the ground is if they left the SEC regular season champion out. They won't do that.
Right. But in order to preserve that, there has to be some admittance that brand, logo, other details matter other than whatever our metrics are. Because they keep trying to talk about, well, we have this proprietary model and it's secret to us and we go based off of that. At some point, I put this out on Twitter. At best, they are working with an incomplete data set as evidenced by their own rankings. At worst, they're working with some Mickey Mouse cherry-picked numbers, and they're going around the table asking who they feel are the 12 best teams. I mean, that's the other side of the coin.
Well, we know their strength of schedule metrics are that way. We know it's come out that they look at just wins and losses and don't have any content. Like that was mind-boggling. I did not know that until it came to light a couple, I think last week on Twitter.
Yeah.
So that means if you are doing math at home, that if you beat 6-6 Utah State or 6-6 Florida State or 7-5 Clemson, those are relatively the same value in the committee's strength of schedule rankings. There's no metrics attached to it. So that's hilarious. That's great. We love that. But anyways, I think Bama's in no matter what. I think moving them up to 9, now you can punish them, quote unquote, for losing by moving them down to 10. And we'll see. As an A&M fan, I know I would rather play Alabama than Notre Dame right now. So if they lose and move down to 10, that's A-okay with me. Let's move on to the Big 12. This is the first one with truly massive stakes and maybe not as big as I originally thought when I wrote Bowl Maniology on Sunday afternoon, but we have a rematch of BYU and Texas Tech, 11 a.m. on ABC on Saturday. This is, of course, a rematch of the game that happened less than a month ago, November 8th in Lubbock. Tech was up, I think it was 26-0 in this one, Mitch, before BYU got a touchdown with a few minutes left in the third quarter. BYU and Texas Tech kind of just like ran the clock out after that. But this is a game where, look, there's been a lot of talk about 11-1 BYU and how their resume match up and how the computers like them. And this is one where I got to see it. I've got to see them actually beat a top tier team. I know the committees really liked Utah. I know they have a couple other nice wins against the top half of the Big 12, but you didn't really challenge yourself out of conference. I know you went to East Carolina. That's a nice win. I think it was UCLA. Was there other big out of conference games? So not your fault that UCLA sucks. I get that, but I got to see you win or at least be competitive against a playoff caliber team before I know that before I go to battle for you and say that you should be in this field.
Yeah. I've been about 50-50 against the spread this year, which has been a terrible fall from grace for my record. So Texas Tech fans maybe look away. I'm going to lock you up this week. I'm going to take the Red Raiders minus the 12.5. I believe that BYU is a good team. I believe that Texas Tech, with a healthy quarterback, is a great team. BYU, Trey, do you know what they averaged through the air this year, where they fit in the total passing offense category?
Enlighten me.
They're 78th, right? They're averaging just under 220 yards a game. Texas Tech is the number one rushing defense in the country. BYU needs to move the ball on the ground, and that's what we saw that they couldn't do in Lubbock. Now, maybe get it out of Lubbock, maybe get the angry Tech fans who can't throw tortillas, a little bit farther off the sidelines in Jerry World, and maybe it's a little bit of a difference. I don't know that BYU has the the options, the ways to move the football consistently against Texas Tech. And we know the Red Raiders can score in the blink of an eye, right? I don't think that Texas Tech necessarily blows them out of the water like Arizona State did to Iowa State last year. But I do think that the Red Raiders win by multiple scores. And I think it's probably a comfortable game. Now, I will say if BYU can find a way to get on the board early, maybe all of that momentum changes, right? Maybe Texas Tech, who's been hearing it all year long, you have to win this year. You don't have a Big 12 championship. You need to get one with all this talent, with all the money, with all the resources. Maybe if BYU can throw a couple of punches early, the Red Raiders tighten up. They haven't been in a lot of those games, a lot of those circumstances where they need to hold on for 4 quarters against a tough opponent. I do wonder if Texas Tech can finish drives. You've got that note in our run sheet. The Red Raiders were dreadful at doing that against BYU earlier in the season at home. They just couldn't find a way to get into the end zone.
And that wasn't the only game that's happened this year, right? True. That happened in the Houston game. That happened to some extent in Kansas State game, the Utah game. So that is the fatal flaw potentially of Texas Tech.
I do think, though, just to close my point out, I think the Red Raiders have the ability to go all 4 quarters with a solid opponent without getting tired, without kind of getting lightheaded, right? If we're using the boxing analogy, I think they're focused and gritty enough to beat BYU, a good team, but to do it by multiple scores. So I'll take Texas Tech minus the 12.5.
I'm going to take BYU to cover the spread because I think it could be a backdoor situation. I think when the stats award graph comes out on Monday or whenever he puts it out this week, it will be heavily favored in Texas Tech, but could be a backdoor situation. 2 scores is a lot on a neutral field when BYU's playing for their postseason life. Tech, I think, needs to play this like it's for their postseason life. It might not actually be, but I would not be feeling safe if I was leaving it up in the hands of the committee if I was Texas Tech. But I'm with you. I think Tech wins this game relatively easily because of the depth on the line of scrimmage. We've been saying it all year long. The best player on BYU's team is LJ Martin. We know that he wasn't 100% when they met up last time. That's a big thing in favor of BYU. In this one, they'll have a healthy LJ Martin. He obviously put the team on his back in the Cincinnati game and made sure that they got out of Nippert with a dub. But I think that plays right into Texas Tech's hands. They're so good at stopping the run. You have to have game breakers on the outside to challenge this Texas Tech defense. And if you don't, if you're just relying on LJ Martin could have a Cam Scattaboo day, right? Like that could happen like it did in the Big 12 championship last year and in that Peach Bowl. But I still think Tech just has too many game breakers on that defense to if you're going to play one-dimensional football like that, it's not going to end well for you.
To circle back on the Texas Tech seeding and whether they're a lock or not, if Tech loses by 1, say they lose, I don't know, 31-30, should they be concerned in your mind going into the next day? Is it just lose the game in general, or is it a situation where all of a sudden, like Baron Morton gets hurt, the offense can't move the ball, we lose, 28-10? Is there kind of like a metric of the loss that you would say, now I'm worried about you, or is it just a loss in general?
If they lose by 1 and it's it's just leaving it up in the hands of the committee, man. I just wouldn't feel comfortable because
it's just
you're leaving it up to people. Yeah. Like just that entire proposition, just go win and take care of it. And you get a bye in the first round. That's huge. But I could see people in that room making the argument that, hey, they only won that game by so many the first time because it was at home. Do they actually have a win over a playoff caliber team? BYU obviously would be in the playoff at that point, but that would maybe cancel out with a lot. Like you can just see the logical circles that they could draw. And I would just rather not leave that up to them. If it were up to me, they'd be in. Now we have precedent over the last couple weeks of what happens when you lose. If you're ranked in the top 4 and lose to a team in the range of BYU, right? Alabama did that. They fell from 4 to number 10. Texas A&M did that. They fell from 3 to 7. So you're going to fall 4 to 6 spots if that precedent is followed. So you're not playing a home game if you lose. At the very least, if you're still in, you're probably going on the road to Norman or College Station. So I'm treating this like a must-win game, though. I don't want any committee tomfoolery.
Well, yeah, I mean, without a doubt, avoid that at all costs. I think they would probably drop Tech with a loss. One, maybe 2 spots. I don't think it would be a big time drop because
A&M should only drop 1 or 2 spots.
Well,
though.
and that's a good point.
BYU is not as BYU is better metrically than Texas, but like Texas is a very good team, and I thought that would carry a little bit of benefit of the doubt, and it was on the road. So
the only thing that I can think of is they went caveman mode and said, well, Oregon and Ole Miss both went on the road, both beat a rival. Texas A&M did not. Therefore, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M are all sitting at home on their couch this weekend, right? So at what point do you penalize Tech for losing a conference championship game to a team that's inside the top 12 and push them below 3 teams that didn't make their conference championship? I agree. I don't want the committee deciding that for my team, for your team, for anybody's team. But I do think at a certain point, they may just have to kind of let the chips fall where they may. I think if BYU wins, the biggest takeaway may be Texas Tech moves to 5, maybe 6, and we figure out how to shoehorn BYU in, which would be a fascinating exercise for this committee.
Well, we have a chaos scenario we want to talk about here in just a second. It starts with the ACC. So let's transition over to the ACC because that's where things can get really, really interesting.
Spicy.
If chalk does not hold there. So ACC championship, if you haven't heard by now, is 7-5 Duke taking on, I think, number 17. I think that's where they checked in at the new rankings, Virginia. The Wahoos having a great season at 10-2. Glad that they're getting rewarded by playing in this game. Duke having a very pedestrian season and getting rewarded as well because tiebreakers and massive conferences just make it not good. So Duke is the first 5+ loss ACC championship game participant since 2018 when Pitt found a way in after winning. I think it was the ACC Coastal at that point in a big tiebreaker scenario. You'd think that the ACC would have figured this out by now how to prevent this, but they did not. It's been a long time for either team to win an outright conference championship. Duke, you have to go all the way back to the 60s. Virginia won one in 1995. It's very simple for Virginia. If they win, they are in as an 11 seed. The chaos scenario happens if Duke wins. So we can talk this game. We can talk chaos scenario, whichever way you want to take it, Mitch. We can kind of funnel it that way.
Yeah, okay. So let's dream for a second because I think the reality could be much more bleak. Let's dream that Duke finds a way to win this. That despite not having any defense to speak of, I don't know that their offense really can keep up with Virginia. We'll see. I mean, that's the path.
Not to throw a turd in the punch bowl, Mitch, but they were down 31-3 in this game like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, it was a less than impressive showing. I think I've been shocked at how bad the Duke defense has been under Manny Diaz. Quite frankly, those are longtime listeners of the show will remember this is kind of the Duke defense that I projected for last year's team. I wasn't incorrect. I was just early, I guess, on my pontification. But if Duke wins and they go to 8-5, we know part of the equation, right? Because Tulane, North Texas, James Madison, all ranked ahead of the Blue Devils. But my question to you and Garrett in our group chat earlier was what on earth happens if you have Duke win, you have James Madison lose to Troy in the Sun Belt Championship? Then does Duke have to go up, or do we suddenly move to the Mountain West, who's got Boise State and UNLV playing? Like, at what point does the committee go, wow, we have to leave out the ACC? Because based off their Miami ranking, Canes aren't getting in. So they would be removing one of the Power 4 conferences from the playoff, which is maybe a bridge too far. I don't know. I don't know what the fallout for the college football playoff would be if they did that. But that is a very realistic scenario that we have on our hands.
The most realistic scenario is JMU takes care of business. Like
Sure.
we'll talk about them in just a second. And
Yeah.
they're like 24.5-point favorites over Troy at home.
Yeah.
They take care of business and Duke wins this game, then the ACC is out. Like they're fully out unless the committee just says, we can't really leave them completely out, and they throw Miami a bone. And somehow magic boardroom happens and Miami jumps Notre Dame. But it can get really shady really quickly if James Madison loses, because James Madison loses. You look at the SP Plus, Smitch, UNLV is actually ranked ahead of Duke at 41, and Duke is 53rd in the SP Plus. Boise State's right behind UNLV at 55. So I think you can make a very clear case, especially if Boise State just runs UNLV out of the water again, that Boise State might be ranked ahead of Duke in a lot of metrics. And at that point, you could be seeing two G5 teams, G6 teams, not named James Madison in this over the ACC. And that's just an insane scenario.
It really is. And I sent the who me meme in our group chat earlier because, listen, a week ago, UNLV and Boise State thought they were playing for pride, right? Boise State had to muster a massive comeback over Utah State to kick New Mexico out of the championship game. San Diego State had the inside track. All they had to do was beat the Lobos on the road, and they're in. They can't get that done. Boise State, who frankly, I left for dead after Maddox Madsen went down. They had some rough games after that injury, but they did slowly find their footing. And now we're to the Mountain West Championship game that we all expected. It was just a road less traveled to get there. But now all of a sudden, UNLV and Boise State technically have the slimmest of margins to get in. I think that is one of the most underrated stories of this entire weekend.
I think UNLV has a much better chance. I think they could stomach an 11-2 team.
Sure.
I don't think they could stomach a 9-4 group of 5, group of 6 team getting in if it were the Broncos. So if you want chaos, if you want to see something really funny, root for Troy and UNLV, I guess, in addition to Duke. Additional chaos scenarios here. You texted me this. What happens if, in addition to those things, Duke wins the ACC, Troy wins the Sun Belt? What happens if, in addition to those things, BYU beats Texas Tech and Georgia beats Alabama? I told you that you would then have 5 teams for 3 spots. You would have to choose between 10-2 Oklahoma, 10-2 Notre Dame, 10-3 Alabama, 11-2 Texas Tech, and 10-2 Miami. 2 of those teams would be out. Miami's obviously out right now, but then you would be leaving one of those other teams that thinks they're solidly in would be playing in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, maybe.
Which is sick, objectively sick. I'm not rooting for that necessarily because I think the product that we would get in the playoff would obviously be diminished. But part of me does really want to see just all hell break loose because I want to see what the committee would do. I would love to see this play out somewhere other than my college football 26 file, right? Just give me total unabashed chaos and let the chips fall where they may. There is part of me that would relish to see that. Should we give our predictions on the actual game? Because the leg 1 of this chaos scenario involves Duke winning. I'm here to tell you, I don't think that's even remotely possible of happening. You mentioned the first game of the season, the prior matchup, where Virginia really was blowing Duke off the football field. They scored 2 touchdowns late to make the box score seem semi-competitive. Duke's defense is terrible. I think they're 98th in scoring defense. They're 97th in scoring defense. Trey, they are 128th in getting off the field on third down. You give Chandler Morris and this Wahoo offense multiple bites at the apple to continue moving the chains. Virginia's going to score points. They're going to run it up. I think this game is that line right? Is it really 3.5?
It's 3.5. I triple checked that. It opened at 2.5.
I think that may be the you've never been here tax for Virginia, at least this iteration of Virginia. They went to the ACC championship game in 2019. So I know the program has been there in recent history. But like until this year happened, the vast majority of college football fans either didn't know who Tony Elliott was or didn't believe in him worth a dime, right? There were a lot of conversations of, is he still going to find a way to miss a bowl game this year? Shout out to William Cockrell, Walk On Moose, our friend on Twitter, who had them going 9-3. I don't think in his wildest dreams he had them actually in the college football playoff, but that's the situation in front of us. I other than maybe I'm missing something, and if you're listening to the podcast, write us at 3TechPod, drop it in the YouTube chat. Like, give me the context, because this is Virginia minus the 3.5 for sure for me.
I would run that to the bank as well. But if you recall, Duke was 6.5 point favorites at home over Virginia just 3 weeks ago. So there's something in the algorithm that really likes the matchup here for Duke as opposed to Virginia. But yeah, I'm taking Virginia here. I'm going to take those points and run with it. I think that unfortunately we don't get to see the ultimate chaos scenario. It kind of dies right here in Charlotte on Saturday night.
I'm going to need a metric to like say, hey, this is what gives Duke the advantage. We know that the Blue Devils at times can score with the best of them and can put up points in bunches, but the defense doesn't get any sort of stops. And Trey, just looking this up because I was curious, even if Duke is able to get into the red zone, they're 87th in the country in red zone conversions. Like they really need to score from beyond the 20-yard line. And I just don't. That's a weird set of stats and metrics and trends to say, yep, all of this makes me confident that Duke is your ACC champion at the end of the night.
Our friend, Stats of War, our internet friend, has it 26.8 to 24 in favor of Virginia. So he's actually, if you just believe his game predictions, inside that number. So I don't know.
Amazing.
Something's got to give, I guess, in that one. Mitch, let's close things out with our G5 championships. Those are going to be really fun, just pure football watching games. Some of them with really real stakes. Like you said, the American, Sun Belt, and Mountain West in particular. We'll start in the American because it is a true win and in scenario. We've got North Texas traveling to Tulane to take on the Green Wave. Both of these teams now finally ranked in the college football playoff top 25. And both head coaches, despite taking new jobs, will be completing their playoff contention with these teams. I think that's really cool. So they'll coach in the American Championship, and then the winner will also coach their team in the playoff. I think North Texas has the edge here. They're 2.5 point favorites on the road. I like that offense. Tulane has just sputtered and looked a little too one-dimensional at times for me in this one. And I think if North Texas can get it humming quickly, then they could find themselves in a really, really nice spot down the stretch in this game where they're playing from ahead and not having to play catch up.
Yeah, we know North Texas is elite offensively. They've put up on average over their last, since their loss to South Florida, which is their one loss on the season, they've put up an average of 51 points a game. Tulane is average at best on the defensive side, and we've seen in critical moments their defense completely break down. I'm thinking of the UTSA game, albeit on the road, but against a team that hasn't done anything special on offense, and that defense just had no answers. Additionally, Tulane gives up a lot of big plays, 20, 30, 40 yards down the field. North Texas can do that all day long, and for all the upheaval that I think that team is probably feeling as Eric Morris prepares to go to Oklahoma State and likely take a lot of those players with him, I think that Tulane, that disadvantage is mitigated by the fact that Tulane is in a very similar boat. And I know John Summerall said he's not poaching any of the Tulane recruits. He wants everybody to stay in New Orleans, but still that doesn't just get brushed off, I don't think, as easily as lip service would like it to. So in an instance where that really is kind of an even playing field, I'm just going to take who I think is the better team, and I think that's Go Mean Green.
I'm with you. I think Mean Green are going to go all the way to the playoffs, and for the Texas fans that are really trying to will their way in right now, there's going to be 3 teams from Texas in this field, and you will not be one of them, unfortunately for you. So let's go to our other G5 games. That one's on Friday night, 7 o'clock on ABC. Also on Friday night, we have the Conference USA Championship. That's Kennesaw State versus Jack State. We have the aforementioned Sun Belt Championship, where Troy will travel to James Madison. The Dukes are 24.5-point favorites in that one. And then we also have the Mountain West Championship with UNLV at Boise. I'll give you dealer's choice here. Where do you want to start?
I love the Conference USA Championship. And I think the storyline here of first-year head coach Jerry Mack, who took over.
2 first-year head coaches.
Yeah, took over at the end of last year versus Charles Kelly, who's a first-year head coach in his own right. Well-traveled coach, a guy that we thought is going to be a great addition to this Jacksonville State team for the defensive side. But we really wondered what the offense would look like. And you and I did that preview. There was a lot of questions about whether or not Jacksonville State would go away from their running game identity and maybe try and air it out a little bit. Thankfully, that didn't end up really happening. Jacksonville State, I think, is 5th in the country in rushing yards. Kennesaw State has been able to move the ball through the air. It's been a fascinating story for both of these teams, and I'm thrilled that we get this unique matchup. Quite frankly, most of the country has never seen Kennesaw State play a football game, and maybe they saw Jacksonville State play in last year's championship, maybe their bowl game. This is really 2 new programs for the vast majority of college football fans, and I hope they tune in because I think with the line at 2.5, I think we could be set for a classic. I think I'm going to take Jacksonville State at home. In games like this, I tend to trust the running game plus a defensive combination just a little bit more. And while I love what Jerry Mack has done, I'm going to roll with Charles Kelly. Take the Gamecocks plus the 2.5.
I'll take Kennesaw State. These 2 teams played a few weeks ago at Jacksonville State, or it might have been at Kennesaw. I can't remember, but Kennesaw put up over 500 yards in that one, Mitch, but they turned the ball over 4 times through 4 interceptions in that one. I think they straighten that out. I think they get the win there. I also am all in on JMU. I know there's a lot of distractions with Bob Chesney taking the UCLA job. He's another guy that's going to coach out however long that season goes through the championship and potential playoff game if Duke can get a win. But Troy, a little team that could in the Sun Belt West. The Sun Belt West was kind of somebody's got to win this thing. It ended up being that after Southern Miss lost to Texas State and kind of opened the door for bowl eligibility for the Bobcats a few weeks ago. It really was just, well, somebody's got to win this one. And Troy found a way to do it on the road to their credit. But I don't think they match up well at all. James Madison's winning Sun Belt games by over 24 points per game. And I don't see that slowing down.
I will salute Jared Parker, though. When he was hired at Troy, there was a lot of naysaying. They just lost John Sumrall, who had obviously done some tremendous things down there for the Trojans. There was kind of an identity crisis, I think, that Troy had, and they were bad last year. They were hard to watch. But Parker steadied the ship this year, and to take Troy back to the Sun Belt Championship, a place that they have been very accustomed to being over the last, 10, 15 years, I think is a great story for the folks at Troy, Alabama. Go Trojans. I'm hoping they keep this close, but yeah, James Madison is truly a tier above, I think, in the Sun Belt. So I'll go the Dukes as well.
I don't see Boise not just running all over UNLV again. I picked UNLV in the first matchup between those 2 teams. I think that was either our first or second slept on game of the week when we introduced that segment. And I will not be making that same mistake again. I'm all in on Boise there. The MAC championship is the last one to talk about. It's Western Michigan and Miami, Ohio taking on each other at Ford Field, 11 a.m. in Detroit on ESPN. So if the Big 12 championship gets boring like we think it might, or you think it might, then flip over to the MAC, because I think this is going to be a fun one. First MAC championship appearance since 2016, that famed 2016 Western Michigan Broncos team that was pushing top 10 in the college football playoff rankings, made it to the Cotton Bowl. Shout out Corey Davis. Was it Corey Davis, I think, that was the big receiver on that one?
Yes. Yeah, Corey Davis and PJ Fleck, baby.
PJ Fleck, where the rowing the boat originated. This is a great story that year. Miami of Ohio, this is old hat for them. This is the 4th straight year they will be in the MAC championship game. I love the story of Western Michigan this year. They've kind of come out of nowhere. They had some bad losses in non-conference play, but just kind of dominated MAC. But I think familiarity gets it done. I'm taking Miami, Ohio in the points here.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said for the comfort factor of Miami of Ohio, basically taking up residence in Ford Field this time of year. I think Chuck Martin is a tremendous coach, and I think he gets his boys ready to play. They were embarrassed last year by Ohio, right? I think there is an element that they want to reclaim their spot atop the MAC. Probably some better talent overall on the Redhawks roster. I'm with you. I've been rooting for Western Michigan all season long. I pointed them out as one of the most fun teams in the MAC during our preseason content, but at the end of the day, I do trust the Redhawks a little bit more in this spot. They're dogs in this game, 2.5 points in favor of the Broncos. So for sure, give me the candy there, and I'll say Miami of Ohio wins.
Well, that is all 9 games. That is the college football playoff top 25. That is a potential disaster scenario for the ACC lined out, and maybe a disaster scenario for the committee lined out as well, where they actually have to get off their butts and make some hard decisions instead of just putting logos in. So
what a shame.
We'll see. Going to be some really interesting things play out on Friday and Saturday, Mitch. Opportunities to win your way in, opportunities to lose your way out. Maybe we'll see. But one more full weekend, semi-full weekend of college football. Do want to remind people, if you're new here, checking us out for the first time, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. If you're still hanging out here, we really appreciate you hanging out here on a Tuesday night. Hope you stick around. Hope you hit that subscribe button and follow along. We're having a mega show on Sunday morning, about 10:30 Central Time is when we're going to get that thing kicked off. We have our friends from the Walk On Red Shirts. We have our friends from Always Talking Ball. We have me. We have Garrett. Mitch is going to be a good person and go to church, but I have night church, so I will be on the live show. And yeah, we're going to have a great time breaking down and reacting to all of the craziness on Selection Sunday. But until then, we're thankful you joined us tonight. Make sure you followed along, like, and subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.